When we depart from this world, we can hardly speak English and have no thought for any other language. We don't believe in languages. Well, we probably don't need them in the afterworld, but we also need other things. We should go out of this life prepared for something more than darkness. We should go prepared for something by means of which we can become citizens of a larger world. We should take with us an insight into the meaning of ourselves. We should be able to look back upon the life we have lived as a significant and important source for wisdom, truth, and love. We should go better people than we came. And if we make all of these things and bury it all in cocaine or something of that kind, we create a world that reminds us a little of the lost Atlantis or something of that kind. We find a world in which there is nothing worth saving. And unless the individual who improves himself, goes after the realities of life with greater integrity, what can he take with him that he didn't bring? He will just go back to where he came from, further disillusioned. Disillusioned means to have an illusion taken away. It doesn't mean truth being taken away. It is a disillusioned person is the person who discovers that his illusions are not true. And the most common of all illusions is the great success illusion. A success pattern that has no foundation in any form of integrities. It is really high time that in this country and in all parts of the world, education should be at least modified to the point that the individual can leave this world a little better than he found it. He needs to be able to live a better life. And he should enjoy the living of it while he's still here. He is here to grow. And unless he continues to grow from childhood on, he is missing the reason for his existence. And that is one of the problems we have. I've talked to many people on this matter. Very few people have any idea of anything except here and now and the rent bill. They want the success. Life depends upon promotions and advantages, a wealthy marriage, a more or less compatible family, and retirement on a successful pension. This is life. The heavens did not ordain this. The universe did not produce man in order that he could live on a retirement income. He may need the retirement income, but he should get it because he is able to make useful contributions to his society. He should be a person who has a vision beyond retirement. He should have ideals. He needs religious principles. He needs philosophy. He needs ethics. And these are carefully ignored. And as a result, we have wars all over the place. So I think in the base of memory, that all these things should be remembered, not forgotten. We should really remember the opportunities we did not make good use of. We should consider and remember the privileges that we abused. We should also remember carefully the penalties of selfishness, that where we spent no thought for anyone but ourselves, and then in the long run found ourselves lonely and forgotten, that we were justly rewarded for our own conduct. We are expecting blessings, but we are not bestowing them. We expect to be treated very kindly, but kindness is not distinguished in society today. Now we're trying to break through some of this with new attitudes towards life, particularly hopes concerning the next century that is coming very close to us. We believe that we must have a better world. So now we can go back into the memory box and see if we can find out how to have this better world. To remember the values that have always protected those who used them. In this troubled sphere of ours, there has always been a minority that tried to do it right. There have always been good people. There have always been unselfish people. And there have always been martyrs who have been remembered in history, but whose lives have been conveniently forgotten in practice. So by going back to see what is there, we can find out what wasn't there and what still isn't here. We can see the opportunities to make the corrections that eluded the ages. But we are not preparing for that. Our young people are not being taught to build for a better world. They are being taught to become skillful in the things that everybody else knows. We are not doing it right. And someone says, well, the textbook hasn't been written. Oh, yes, it has. The history is the textbook. History has inspired philosophy, sanctified religion, advanced the arts and sciences, and given us the great economic reforms that are necessary to our survival. The democracy of Lycurgus in Sparta was a very good example of a system that worked. He said very simply that when you're born into a state, that you must accept with your birth a certain responsibility to protect your community, your world, and your system. If you are a person worthwhile, you have the courage to be honest. You have the understanding and insight to be thoughtful. You have the physical and moral impulses to live a decent life. And most of all, you realize that when you disgrace yourself, you disgrace your country and you disgrace your world. And while Lycurgus' system worked in Sparta, it held. And it made the Spartan take the attitude that it was a privilege to protect that which was necessary for the common good. Any exploitation was bitterly punished. And it was also in a way in Athens. For while the Athenians were more luxury living and did not have the same depth of purpose for the general meaning, in Athens there were certain rules. If you were a citizen of Athens, there were things you couldn't do. And if you insisted on doing them anyway, you were properly reprimanded. You could be punished by imprisonment, you could be exiled from the state, or you could be executed. There was to be no possible way of deteriorating the state without punishment. If you built a building that was poorly constructed and fell apart, you either had to rebuild the building or stand a very heavy penalty. There was no way in which you could buy your way out of a responsibility. There was no way in which you could trick someone else into giving you privileges that you did not deserve. Actually, on various occasions, Pythagoras, going through the towns, is said to have struck the keynotes of temples and buildings. If these keynotes were right, the building stood. If they were wrong, and he had continued sufficiently with a lute, he could have destroyed the building. In other words, there are laws, architecturally, artistically, culturally, musically, which, if fulfilled, make a beautiful world. Give everyone an opportunity to be the best that they can be, and give to even the simplest person a place in destiny. This is all part of the plan of things. Today we look back 200, 300, or 400 years to the founding of our own country. The history of our country is in the memory of our history and in our documents and in the various passages of our constitutions. These things are known. We know what we need, we know what we should have, but no one really seems to care. Everyone is centered only upon what is best for him at this moment, and he is going to fall almost certainly for that which has the greatest economic pressure. So we are not learning. Now, a lot of people are learning. Many are thinking, but when the moment comes, the old prejudices will sink in, and the individual will fail to make the changes that could actually put him into a proper situation. Memory is short when it comes to public office. It is as short as the promises that are made and broken before the ink is dry. But memory also can tell us who were the good ones, what they did, what their concepts were, and why we should test the life we live. Every art, science, and policy should be tested. Nothing should be accepted that is not provable or demonstrable in some way. We can check and test every law that we pass. We can do and check every statement that is made to find out what is essentially true and right. And memory has given us this privilege. Memory is a sort of muse, a mystical deity, which gives us the power to know what no book itself can teach us, but which books are written about. We have a great libraries in the world of books telling of the thoughts, wisdom, ideals, and dreams of other people, of other nations, of other races. For the most part, however, the average individual simply says, well, why read them? We're already far advanced beyond their condition. Why should we read about the Greeks 25 centuries later? They're gone. Well, the thing we don't realize is that this term gone is gradually applying also to us. And if we do not catch up on some of this reading, we will not know why we are not succeeding. So all this business of neglecting the past because it's past must be changed, because we are building a past which will also have to be forgotten unless we change it. And to change it means to get to work on it and to do the things that will help to do it. Good reading is very helpful to memory, but at the present time good reading is not particularly popular. It's like the motion picture and television productions. It is simply sensationalism to bring in money. A book is a success not because it tells us something, but because it sells 1 million copies. And the more unimportant the book, the larger the sale. Why? Because the average person is not trained to recognize value. We do not know the difference. It never occurs to the average person that his reading should teach him something. He thinks of it only as a way of amusing himself. When the television programs are so bad he can't stand them, he can pick up a modern novel and go through that. We do not have any sense that the hours that we have in this world are valuable, that there are times in which we should do things that are important. And if we want to know what's important, we must look inside of ourselves and in the great pattern of world motion. We must see how we can fit into progress, how through us someone, if it's only a very close friend, will be a little better, a little wiser, a little more useful to themselves and to those around them. We've got to have more and more interest in life as growth and not in life as joy. Yet growth can be the greatest joy in the world. The individual who is doing something worthwhile has a standard of values that the indolent individual will never understand. There is definitely a tremendous sense of purpose, and once this picks up an individual, that individual has a richer life than they could otherwise ever hope for. So that it's not a case of giving up the fun and taking nothing but responsibility. It's rather the recognition that sometimes the greatest fun is in the responsibility. Then when we're doing what we should be doing, there is a sense of internal security and sufficiency. When we're doing what we know we shouldn't do simply because we're trying to have fun, then there is great trouble. We do see this realized every day in the narcotics problem. We see the individual who wants to be 12 feet tall and as a result of that killed himself off in his 30s and 40s. He not only wants to be 10 and 12 feet tall, but he is perfectly willing to pay so much money for the privilege of being that tall that he has to commit burglary and murder to get the funds. And now we find this handling of drugs being lowered into the grammar schools, where the students are selling narcotics to get their own. This is something that is simply unbelievable. It is something that shows complete indifference to all sense of values. It is a gradual closing in of mediocrity upon everyone. The process of gradually becoming less and less in order to feed an ego which is dying of starvation because it is doing nothing significant. If we want to be free from this sense of being midgets, then instead of trying to be great drug addicts, why not become great human beings by doing things that are rewarded by recognition or by achievement which brings comfort and consolation to the inner life? We are in the face now of the realization that memory is a factor in the development of the soul. It is a soul power. It is there in order that we can transmute the useless into something sublime, that we can transform the center of life from this constant nagging pressure to have rather than to become. We can escape all of these forces by developing a tremendous sense of internal integrities. We must do this. It is necessary. It is part of the life that was given to us when we came here. So that we need now to recognize how to be 12 feet tall and sober. How we can become involved in those useful and meaningful purposes by which we can change the course of history. That we can pick a world out of the doldrums and put it back on its feet. It is perfectly proper and not right and natural that we should have a better century ahead. We should learn something, but it only means that we're going to have bigger computers. If it means that Wall Street is going to have more authority, if it means that we're going to have internal and international political strife all through the 21st century, it's very possible that the gods on high Olympus will figure something a little more strenuous to take care of the situation. We don't want that. We want to be independent, and that means that we must be free from our own mistakes. As long as we're in slavery to them, we cannot be truly free. So if we want a world that is worth living in, a world that fulfills the purpose for itself, each individual must become a little more studious, a little more thoughtful, a little more aware of true values, and find that he doesn't want to forget it as far as his memory is concerned. He wants to teach it. He wants to understand it. He wants to use the memory to advance the total growth of himself. He needs the memory to point out his past mistakes, to rejoice over his past virtues, and to use the combination of mistake and virtue to move the whole pattern of character a step forward towards the fulfillment of its original purpose. Memory is very important as a part of the compound of the human being. As far as we know, he is the most advanced creature with memory that we have on earth. There are indications of primitive memory amongst many animals and birds, but there are no proofs of the continuity of memory that we have with the human being. Not only has he the memory, but he has the auditory system to tell what he learns and what he knows. He is able to plan something about the future. The tree has to stand till it falls. Man can move, can do things, can make changes that are vital and important. But in order to do that, he must recognize what is important. And it is not important that he be indolent. It is not important that he settles back and just enjoys himself, because if enough people do that, the world will fall. It is far better that the individual should wear out than simply rot away. And it is far better that each day we should try to do something a little more important to those we love, for those we think of, for the world we belong to, and for the nation we want to respect. These things are part of a good memory. We remember what we have done, we remember how we can correct it, we can remember what we learned and forgotten. We can restore various types of knowledge, and through study and reading we can enrich memory so that it will continue to serve us throughout life, and for all we know, afterwards. After all, if we have no memory afterwards, then there would have no need for a memory here. Nature has endowed us with memory. It has given us these values in order to use them. And the fact that we have a memory here indicates clearly that it is part of our immortal nature. It goes with us beyond the material world. If it all ended in matter, the sooner we forget it, the better. But if we have to live with it, and we will if we are immortal creatures, then a memory is very important, because we have to live with what we've done, what we've thought, what we've known. We have to live with the degree of humanity that we have achieved. We must face our loves, we must face our hates. We must recognize our compliments and our accusations. We must realize and know all that we have been in order to have the directives to become all that we can be. And for these purposes, memory is extremely important and must be cultivated in every way possible. We need it, but we need to use it, not abuse it. We do not need to use it in order to know how many people are on a baseball team. We do not need to use it as statistics in the rise and fall of stock. If we do use it for that and had common sense, we would be out of the market. But we're still in it. But we do need memory to use it to grow, to use it to become better people day by day, to better understand the reason of life. And suddenly, for perhaps the first time in human history, it is possible for the veil to be lifted and we can see what life is, what its real purpose is, why we live, why we were created in the first place, and what is going to happen in the end. That we are not merely little fragments floating up for a few years on the surface of the ocean of life. We are living things, growing things. We are creatures with a past and a future. And it is our memory of the past that will help us to build the future. These things we have to think about and continue to grow with to the very best of our abilities. So I think Lord Bacon probably was more or less correct when he pointed out that memory was the open gate to a world knowledge. Memory was the ability to profit by the experience of everything that has gone before. Memory is the great kind of schoolroom. In it are the classes in which every bit of available knowledge taught. Memory changes the world into one great university in which each person who comes into this world has a chance to graduate with honors. And it is best for each person to try to do this as best he can. And it's certainly better than wandering around through the years blaming the politicians, blaming this or that, or creating antagonisms and anarchy. It is much better to recognize the importance of growing, to save our energy for constructive thoughts. If we cannot help others, then we can perhaps help ourselves. If the others do not wish to listen, we can quietly listen to the voices of memory. And by gradually growing, even in through our own early life, if we take the first 25 years of the present life and think back on it, we're going to learn something. Everything that is majored by thoughtfulness helps to enrich memory, and in so doing helps us to be better people. So the mystery of memory is, I think, very, very vital to us. It is one of the great keys to the survival of mankind. It is not something that was simply an accident that we have to suffer for our own past. It is part of the balance of nature. It is the one power in nature by which we learn that we cannot make a mistake without ultimately growing as the result of the mistake. And we cannot do it right without ultimately being relieved of some pain or pressure that was delaying or hurting us. If we live right physically, we will live right morally, mentally, emotionally. Every case we have rules to follow. If we live according to rules, we will live. And memory is the records of those rules, as written down in stone, on tablets, in clay, or in the strata of rocks. It is something that reminds us forever that we live in a lawful universe. This is a purposed creation, and either we have to be purposed human beings or we will suffer. We are not going to be allowed to ruin the world and then go scot-free after having done it. Nor are we allowed to say that the world can ruin us. We have a right to think. We have a right to learn. And the memory gives us the skill to explore the mysteries of truth, the mysteries of knowledge, and to build a solid foundation upon our visions and our hopes. It is through memory, largely, that we know the mystery of love. And when we think of those we have loved, it becomes part of the immortality of all good. All memories that are constructive can be lived with. Those that are destructive must be transmuted, or they will destroy the person. So we are here to grow in beauty and in truth. We are here to perfect faculties and powers and not abuse them. And memory is one of those beautiful and kindly things which we can disturb and discredit, but which is always there to make a better life for us and give us a better hope for the future. And as we look back upon the past and see what we've come through, let us also look forward into the future, knowing that we are capable of building a future according to our heart's desire. We do not have to live in any kind of a world that we haven't built. We do not face any problems that we haven't caused. And when we solve the problem, we have the reward. And the reward is what we're all seeking: peace and human brotherhood and the reconciliations of all of the disputes and sorrows and problems that have burdened mankind. Well, that's it.